Colin Mockery, and you're listening to Dispatch Radio.
Well, let's talk with Alex Snitker now about some local races. I want to really kind of start with John McCain because I know he loves to talk about John McCain. And John McCain dropped his spine on the floor this week and said, I am not going to go to the Republican convention because I got to try to win. He's on the ropes. My friend Kelli Ward's actually got him on the ropes. What do you think about that, Alex?
I can't think of anything that would be better. If I was in that state, I would definitely find a way to help that woman out to take out John McCain. It's so nice to see guys like that starting to lose. And John McCain is the greatest example of somebody that utilized, his story to really kind of just do damage to America. And I can't even say it any other way. I don't really have any respect for the man. I do feel bad that he was taken prisoner and all that other kind of stuff. And, he did his service honorably. However, with that being said, he's been dishonorable ever since, though. I mean, his time in Washington, D.C., he was part of Keating 5. He's been part of all the corruption that's been going on. If you're looking for the definition of a bad guy in Washington, John McCain's the guy you want to look at for that. And it's nice to see that they're starting to lose.
Well, and I think 2010 it was close. He had some competition in the primary. The establishment dumped a ton of money in for McCain, made sure he won the primary. Of course, he coasted to victory over the Democrat. The same thing would hold true here. The thing I think is very interesting is, obviously, he's made a lot of promises. Trump has brought the border down as a huge topic in their state. And McCain has not followed through on any of those promises yet. And now it's 2016. So 10 years later, people are still looking for a border fence and looking for some answers, and McCain doesn't have them. And I think it's a very interesting. There's probably about 4 or 5 senators I think are really, really at risk here. Mark Kirk's one, and Portman is another one, where they have flip-flopped around so much. They've angered this, I don't know what to call them, liberty-leaning, Tea Party-esque. They don't really have a name anymore, where they're gonna try to get someone to run out there and to get rid of this guy. Now, I don't know if Kelli Ward's any better, but how could it be any worse?
Well, it definitely couldn't be any worse. It really couldn't be any worse than McCain. I mean, we need some. Years. Yeah, we need some fresh people up there. We need some people that aren't just going to be going along with the lines, with the party lines on this one. And maybe she can do it, maybe she won't. The one unfortunate thing that happens a lot of times is these people that start off as the grassroots insurgency and that they win, it seems like they get bought up real quick. So maybe she can hold and not get bought up by the establishment, but you'd be surprised on how quickly, I can only speak from local personal experience, is that I was helping out a candidate in a Republican primary, and we were able to beat the incumbent. He was up against a Republican incumbent. We were able to beat the incumbent, go to the general, and we weren't even 2 weeks in, and I was talking with him, and he was telling me all the stuff that was going on, how this guy approached him, and people that were attacking him just before he did that turned, and just to watch the expression on that candidate's face just really kind of almost try to sell me on it. Like, oh yeah, well, we need to do this. And I'm like, what? Like, are you kidding me? No, these people are your enemy, and you're so quickly to go into bed with them, and it's because they talk real nice and say, we're going to do this for you, and we're going to do this for you, and we care about your issues. You just got to kind of fall in line this time, and you'll see how quickly they'll do it.
Snitker, do you watch House of Cards?
I do not watch House of Cards, unfortunately. I'm going to have to do a binge weekend and watch it, but I have not watched any episodes.
You got to dive in. Every one of them watched this. I've had countless sources tell me this. I've even had Glenn Beck quote Ted Cruz comments about how they all watch this, and that there's so much accuracy portrayed on the show. I believe the show is kind of almost like mocking the Clintons in a lot of ways, and there's really no direct parallel. It's not a one-to-one, any character, but there's definitely representations, and you'll see a lot of the stories we've heard and read about McConnell and Boehner play out, the old school sort of a Robert Byrd guy that no one really wants to mess with, and there's a Tea Party guy. I think he comes along at the end of season 1, into season 2, those kinds of things. The gameplay that's revealed in the show should scare America to death. It's hard for me. I'm still way behind because there's a lot of graphic profanity and nudity and drug use, and I feel like I have like 6 showers after watching some of these shows. But it is shocking how American politics works, if it even works like a third of this level of corruption and paid votes. And we know it because of Obamacare and some of the other bills that have come through, of all the different pork and kickbacks, and what you're saying couldn't be more true. And let me turn to Florida, because I know that's going to be your backyard, and you're definitely very familiar with Alan Grayson and David Jolley. Both are going to now run for U.S. Senate. Patrick Murphy is also in the mix. However, he has opted out of what's called open debate. It's going to be hosted by, or at least moderated by, to some degree, by the Young Turks. I know you're a fan of them and their work. Where do you think we're at with replacing Rubio with the Jolley versus Grayson versus Murphy thing? Where can you come down on those three?
Well, I think that the thing that Jolley is trying to do, and there's none of those three that I even kind of like at all as candidates. But that means if I don't like them, I don't have any bias one way or the other for any of them. But I think that Jolley he's got his own primary he's got to deal with. I mean, he's not necessarily the shoe. I mean, you got the lieutenant governor running in that race. You got a current congressman running in that race. So he's got a full field, and what he's trying to do is to eliminate that field by just dealing with whoever the Democrat nominees are going to be and staying out of the fray in the other one. And remember this about Jolley. Jolley had to leave that race because he knew that with redistricting, he was going to be up against Charlie Crist. Yeah. And Charlie Crist, for all the times he's lost in this state, and he's lost a couple times now, he never loses Pinellas County. And this district was made for Charlie Crist. Now, I don't think they even did it on purpose. I think that if you look at the way the line should be set up, it should be set up this way. But Charlie Crist is going to win this thing, so Jolley had to go somewhere else. And I think Rubio was going to have a problem, and that's why Rubio didn't run for re-election. And now with Grayson trying to get in the mix to go up to the Senate, he was thinking that he could take his, liberal, shield and go up there without realizing that this guy is a train wreck even on the Dem side, and that he didn't think he'd get somebody like, well, Murphy got in there. Yeah. And then when Murphy got in there, he's just like, he's already wrapped up all the endorsements and all the other check boxes you had to check box, so he don't even have to get involved in it. So Grayson's trying to do it to make Murphy compete against him, and at the same time, Jolley's doing it so he doesn't have to compete against the other guys. And I didn't know about this till me and you just talked, but it makes sense as to why both of them will do it for different reasons, and I don't think it's even going to work. I mean, not that the Young Turks. I like the guys, but I completely disagree with them on a lot of stuff. There's so many issues with those guys I disagree with. But at least they've been upfront about these things, and they're trying to get a debate going. But you need to have a primary debate first. Like, it's almost too early until after the primaries to even kind of go down this road, because if they're trying to do this now, that means they're doing it before the primary. So you're going to exclude all of the other candidates?
But if you were working with either of these two guys, and I know your feelings, I share your feelings, it really works in your advantage if you can just separate yourself out to have that. First off, they both have recognizable names in Florida. Most of the electorate are plebes. They have no idea what's going on in the real world. If they recognize your name, you're 80% of getting the yes. That's all you need. They know your name. Hey, I know who Alan Grayson is. I know that name. Doesn't matter what they say or do most of the time. You can kind of separate yourself from the pack, whether it be in the primary or whatever, or more importantly, right, separate yourself in the polls, right? You can just make the Orlando Sentinel, the Tampa Tribune, the Tampa Bay Times, the Miami Herald. You can make the poll so that your name starts to float to the top. So even if you have to go through the primary process, your name recognition kind of moves you along faster.
Well, no, that's true. And Jolley does not want to get in a debate with these other guys. He'd rather deal with Grayson because he knows that there's identifiable differences that he's going to be able to talk about in that race. When you're looking at DeSantis and you're looking at Lopez Cantera, that's a whole different animal. Those guys will be able to attack him in ways in which Grayson will never attack him on. Grayson's going to go down the typical road of I'm a Democrat and this is what I believe and you're trying to kill this and this and this and this. And Jolley's not afraid of that because Jolley is actually, he's kind of a moderate. I mean, he's a real moderate. I mean,
it becomes more of an establishment fight than an idealistic fight on either side. They both get to avoid an idealistic fight on either side and just stick to more of establishment fighting.
Yeah, it's going to be talking points, which I'm surprised the Young Turks would even agree to that. But, it'll end up being a talking point debate.
They might these guys up. You know how they are. They're really good with that kind of stuff.
No, that's true. And maybe they're looking at that as a trap as well. But it's only a trap for Jolley, though, not a trap for Grayson, because they like Grayson. They like where Grayson's at on this stuff. He will feed them more red meat than you see at the zoo and the Lowry Park Zoo.
Laurie Park Zoo references. Snitker, as we head into midterms, is wrapped up, and it just seems like things just blink. And you come out of one thing, you're right. The 2 years is not 2 years in a political cycle. People are already ready to ramp up another campaign and all that and kind of stuff. As we head into another cycle, turnout's so much different for a presidential election. The Democratic turnout especially is so much more impactful for a presidential election. Who in your mind in Florida stands to benefit from that on a local level? Some of the local races, House races, Senate races, or just the Washington representatives that people may not be realized?
You know what? It's going to sound like I'm being very negative when I say this, and I don't even mean it in a negative way. I kind of mean it just as it is. I think what you're going to see is that in some races you'll have an insurgent that goes in there, but for the vast majority of them, it's almost going to be like business as usual. Is that it's going to be that these guys are that the turnout, and you don't know where the turnout's going to be. And I actually think you're going to have either the largest turnout that you've ever seen, or it's going to continue on the downtrend, because the trend's been going down when it comes to turnout. So it's either going to go real big or it's going to go down. A lot of this depends on Trump. If Trump makes it through and does get the nomination, I do think that you're going to see record turnout. Now, he could still lose that, because it could be record turnout to just beat him. But if it's somebody else, I think that both sides of the electorate are going to go down a little bit. Now, you got to remember, with Clinton, I don't think that she's going to, the black vote ain't necessarily going to go for Clinton. I mean, Obama was a different story. I mean, Clinton is not necessarily doing well in that arena. She's doing okay, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get that vote turned out. So I don't know how big it's going to be on the Democrat side. I think that if Trump being in there is going to add a huge amount to it. Now, does that parlay into other people winning races? It's tough to say, because if you look at the primaries numbers of what they're estimating the primaries are at is going to be low. It's real low.
Like, we don't know primary races right now. Right?
So those are where the insurgent campaigns are at. So if they lose those primaries, then when the general comes around, those people aren't going to be around. Now, unless they're a third party guy. But then again, as much as people are disgusted with both of the parties, and I would agree with them, they haven't necessarily made that step to where they're going to vote outside of those two parties. Now, is that going to change this year? It's possible, but it all depends on the kind of exposure that all those candidates are going to be able to get. And, for the presidency, it's going to come down to if Johnson can get to 15, or if he wins the nomination, he can get to 15, or whoever the libertarian is, they can get to 15, and they might be in the presidency race. That might trigger allowing those third-party candidates into some of the smaller races. And look, and I'll say this as well, I've looked at a lot of different candidates that are out there and a lot of people that are running, and when it comes to the third-party candidates, there's not a whole lot that I have been impressed with at all. I mean, it's unfortunate.
Let me ask you for a name drop there, because that's all I was going to get to close this out here. Is there a name or two that we should keep an eye out for? Is somebody that you like?
In the state of Florida, you know what? I'll give you a name next week. I'm not going to give you a name this week, but I'll give you a name next week. There's a couple things I got to look at in order to really kind of solidify that, and I don't want to speak out of turn on that one, but I'll give you, when we do one next week, let's go into a couple of the places that you could be looking at.
Okay, sounds good. You heard it. Alex Snitker giving us the update, the inside track, Florida and beyond, and we'll have him back for more, and we'll be doing it again.
Thank you very much, Brandon.